out. If you have an issue technically related, you can email or you can chat with me here as soon as I get it enabled. Otherwise, please use the Q&A function, not the chat, to ask questions. Panelists will see the Q&A, but they may not see the chat. So that's how you do it. There's a lot of people here tonight. This is exciting. So Philomena, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Welcome to the Elementary Science and Technology Curriculum webinar. I would like to recognize STAO, the Science Teachers Association of Ontario, OCTI, and the Association of Computer Science Educators. This has been funded by the Province of Ontario, and we're very excited to welcome all of you to our webinar. We'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. It's important for us to acknowledge the original settlers and caretakers of this land as we take steps towards reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples of Canada. As Canadians, we are all treaty people, and it's important for us to recognize that we live, we work, and we play on the land of people who were here prior to European settlement. We also need to recognize the important contributions of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples to the field of science as a whole, and to recognize the benefits of incorporating diverse perspectives in all of our classrooms. Creating spaces where our students are able to see the contributions of local Indigenous communities allows our Indigenous students to feel represented and also helps our non-Indigenous students to gain a better understanding of Indigenous science and traditional knowledge. As we continue down the path of reconciliation, this will help us all to create more inclusive science environments where a variety of perspectives are welcome and contribute to how we see the world today. Just take a minute and think about where you are.
Lamina, thank you very much for that. If you're just signing in with us, please know that we are having some issues with our chat function. So we're just going to be going ahead and using the Q&A feature that you can see at the bottom of your screen there. And one of the first things we'd like to do is we want to just get a general feeling of everybody who is attending today. So on the next slide that we'll show you, there are 6 different sheep showing some different states of mind. What we'd like you to do is we want you to choose the best picture that shows how you're feeling right now about this new science curriculum and about some of the resources that you're going to learn about this evening. We'll be checking in with you as we go through the presentation and to see if your feelings have changed and how they have in that way. Thanks, Philomena. You can go ahead. So these are our 6 sheep in various degrees of confidence and various degrees of stress. So in the Q&A, you can just go ahead and type the number that you most identify with at this point in time. And we'll give you about 30 seconds to do that.
No one should feel bad for doing this.
And the great thing about this is we get to see some instant feedback about how people are feeling in regards to the resources, if you've had a chance to look at them, and just about the new curriculum that was implemented this year to start with there. So lots of 1s, some 5s, some 3s, couple of 6s, lots of 4s, a 2. Someone is feeling a 1 and a 4. Yeah. Very good. So as not at all surprising, they are all over the board. We have some in 1, some in 2, 3, 4, 5, and some 6 as well. So knowing that, we know that everybody has their own comfort level with that. And our hope tonight is to be able to give you some more confidence and some more comfort in this level there. So thank you.
Thanks, Naomi, for that great warm-up activity. So our presenters are also the long-range plan writers and creators of the curriculum resources. So on the line tonight, we have Justine from the Toronto District School Board, Louise from the Ottawa Carleton District School Board, Megan from the Waterloo Catholic District School Board, Naomi from the Avon Maitland District School Board, Paula from the Huron Superior Catholic District School Board, that's me, and Philomena from the Waterloo Region District School Board. So our agenda will provide an overview of the revised science and technology curriculum, and we'll look at the key changes in Strand A. We'll review STEM skills and connections, and as well as here an overview of experiential learning and complete a walkthrough of both models of the long-range plans. There are some curriculum supports and resources that will be presented before we have a question and answer period, a survey, and then finally next steps.
Our learning goals this evening are to look closely at the resources that have been developed to help support the implementation of the revised science and technology curriculum. Specifically, we want everyone to walk away with an understanding of how the long-range plans are structured, including practical applications and cross-curricular learning, as well as their connection to both the curriculum and the new curriculum resources. We will spend a brief but purposeful time looking at the long-range plan so participants can use it in the near future with the opportunity to answer any preliminary questions. We will also share an example of how the long-range plans were used to develop a series of grade 3 structures experiences. There will be an opportunity to discuss possible obstacles to implementing the new science curriculum, such as teaching a split grade, as these are surmountable. Lastly, we will plan where to go with further questions that arise from the use of the long-range plans.
Thanks, Megan. The new science curriculum is designed to prepare students for deeper levels of science and technology learning as they move into secondary school and beyond. The revised science and technology curriculum includes 3 main goals: developing critical skills through scientific and technological investigations, exploring science and technology concepts with a focus on practical connections to students' lives and communities, and considering the bigger picture by making connections between science and technology and the changing world. The inclusion of Strand A is the most significant change to the science and technology curriculum. This strand needs to be embedded throughout the year in an ongoing manner. Thank you, Philomena. So for the most part, strands B, C, D, and E remain unchanged, and a few expectations have been updated, renamed, or combined. And the ministry has provided a summary of the changes, and we'll include that link in the chat. Philomena, if you could advance me, thank you. So experiential learning provides students with the opportunity to become absorbed in their learning as they participate in an activity, to reflect on the experiences while they're participating, and then applying what they've learned to their lives. These learning opportunities can occur in person as well as virtually. Experiential learning tasks that are connected to various aspects of the curriculum help students gain a better knowledge of themselves and of a range of career opportunities available. There are 2 areas of learning outlined in Creating Pathways to Success. A link to this document will be provided in the chat box for your reference. When educators are providing experiential learning opportunities, each area of the experiential learning cycle, so participate, reflect, and apply, should be considered to ensure that each is a planned part of the experience. Some examples of planned learning experiences in the community may include outdoor education, project-based learning, job shadowing, job twinning, field trips, field studies, work experience, and cooperative education at the high school level. So all of these opportunities assist students in understanding the relevance of their classroom learning and how it's connected to the world. Additionally, planned learning experiences also assist students in developing transferable and interpersonal skills and work habits. Students can then dive into careers of interest as they map out their pathway through school to their post-secondary destination, whether in apprenticeship training, college, community living, university, or even the workplace. The new science curriculum includes hands-on experiential learning opportunities to support classroom activities, and also indicates that coding is to be integrated across strands as a means of providing a hands-on experiential way to learn about science and technology concepts, a hands-on experiential way to do science, a hands-on experiential way to develop solutions to problems, a hands-on experiential way to demonstrate their learning, and finally, a hands-on experiential way to learn about the digital world around them.
Thank you, Paula. Next, we have Louise.
And I was muted. On the new resource site, scitechontario.ca, you will find resources created by certified Ontario teachers in collaboration with STAO, OCTI, and the ASCE. The long-range plans outline a year-long set of activities for teaching and learning, science and technology. Long-range plans are living documents that are revised as educators become increasingly aware of the abilities, strengths, needs, and interests of their students. There are 2 models for each grade, Model 1 and Model 2. Further down on the site, you'll find as well curriculum resources that are currently being developed that we will present later today. Let's have a look at one of the examples. For grade 2, Long Range Plan Model 1, when you click on it, you'll see that you can download it in 2 versions. Each model will have PDF version that you can download or a Word file that can be modified by the user. Model 1 is intended to support an integrated big ideas-based pedagogy with a focus on developing key science and technology skills and combining multiple strands in different blocks. When you open the module, you'll see the items for STEM skills that are embedded throughout the document to easily see if the activities are related to experiments, engineering design, coding, for example. Each term has a generic overview, and then the first column will be outlining a timeline that you can use monthly or sometimes combining months. These can be modified according to the learners that you have, local resources, climate considerations, for example. The second column supports an inquiry stance by offering big ideas and guiding questions for the unit of study. The third column highlights activity suggestions through the STEM skill instruction, strand A. How this relates to other strands is found in the subsequent columns, and the final columns give you examples of resources and additional links that you can use.
Can you keep sharing, Louise, please, your screen? Thank you. And everything that Louise just shared, you'll have the opportunity to see during our exploration time. So Naomi, thank you.
Thanks, Philomena. So just like Model 1, Model 2 has an editable format and a downloadable format that can be used by educators that needs to change and adapt the timeline of expectations on the abilities of their students. As well, Model 2 has the same symbol system that coordinates with the specific learning experiences that support the expectations of Strand A and ensure that these expectations are successfully interwoven through the rest of the curriculum throughout the year. Model 2 differs from Model 1 in that the focus of each plan is based on guiding questions rather than the big ideas that you see in Model 1. Oh, excuse me for just a moment. My apologies. There we go. I just clicked on the wrong slide for me. Because of this, educators who are new to teaching science and those who are still building confidence in this subject area have a more structured template to follow. Model 2 is more scheduled and breaks down the science curriculum into manageable chunks. Each month or two has an overview that helps identify the key learning goals from that time period. Following this are the specific expectations that will be addressed. With both models 1 and 2, expectations are often revisited to help students develop a more global understanding of the science curriculum. The column structure and headings in Model 2 are quite similar to Model 1, with the biggest difference being, of course, the second column, which is the guiding questions as opposed to the big ideas. Thanks, Louise. All right, so we said that we would check in with you to see how you're feeling, and we're just about at that halfway point already. And we'd love to know how you are feeling after this big chunk of information there. So our chat is working now, so we don't need to use the Q&A. Instead, we'll use the chat function, and we're just checking to see how you're feeling right now. Are you feeling a little bit more prepared, or are you feeling a little bit more overwhelmed? So in the chat, we would just like you to type the first letter of whichever one you most connect with right now, and we'll just have a quick look at the status and move on from there. Thank you.
So it's funny. It goes P-O-O-P, and that spells poop. P-O, pop. That's a good word too.
And you know what,
Weird.
Philomena, as soon as I did that and I started thinking about that, oh, it's going to say poop a lot. So, but we're educators, we can handle that.
And
so.
we're primary educators too. So we're going to give it another 20 seconds so we can see how many OPP officers we have, how many pops and how many poops.
All part of science.
Amen. All right. We're coming up to the most exciting part of our webinar, which will be to review the long-range plans.
Okay, thank you. Now for the fun part. At this point, we want to give you the opportunity to explore the long-range plan model for your grade, 2 models, for about 10 minutes, and come back to the group with an answer to the questions. What seems to be the most useful for what you might be teaching in the near future? And which of the 2 models resonates with you and might work tomorrow in your classroom? We'll add, sorry, go ahead.
No, pardon me, you were correct. I'm just thinking out loud.
We'll add the questions in the chat for you as well. We'll be here during that time in case there's any questions that come up. And should we meet back at 7:30?
Yes.
Enough time? Okay. So we will meet back here at 7:30, but we'll be here in case you have any questions we can answer.
So could you repeat the question again? What seems to be the most useful and what topic?
I will put them in the chat.
Thank you very much, Megan.
And I think since we now have the differentiation between the chat versus the question and answer, if you do have a question, if you can put it in the Q&A, then that way we can address it quickly. If we can answer it right away for you there. So thank you.
So this is also an opportunity for you to go and grab a drink or use any facilities you'd like to. And we're excited about this because we know you're looking at the actual long-range plans. And please come back at 7:30 because the next part, which will be the actual resources, that's even better.
So we'll be giving a sneak peek of the resources that haven't been posted yet.
Now, Claire, I see that there's someone who is having trouble opening or seeing the chat there. So I'm not sure if they should just exit and come back out. I think it's just a one-off rather than all of the an issue with the whole system. So perhaps try that, go out and come back in and see if that comes up for you.
I see that she just disappeared, but sometimes you just have to wiggle your mouse for the bottom part to pop up. So
She was able to post a question. So that's what makes me think perhaps there was an issue with the chat because she did post a question there, but.
That's true.
Okay. Well, hopefully she pops back on.
Okay, fantastic.
So this is being recorded. This is the sound of thinking. Thank you, Paula, for your question. You'll have a sneak peek at, as Louise said, to the resources, because as soon as we're finished our look at the long-range plans, Justine will be sharing some actual resources.
And Mita, I saw your question about when they'll be available, and they should be available sometime this month. I'll talk a little more about this in a bit, but there's an option to sign up for email alerts for when they go live on the website. So that might be something to look into. It's on the same site where you signed up for this webinar, but I'll go over that in a little bit.
Since Paula had a question about comparing grades, and somebody mentioned it, I did go to the site from the Ontario curriculum. And when you're looking at a specific grade and you have the specific expectations, there's a tool that says compare grades underneath. And that allows you to compare the strands across. It allows you to find, like when we're talking about inquiry, a lot of those questions can span multiple grades. So looking at those inquiry and guiding questions can help you plan for multiple grades at the same time.
Does anyone want to comment on Gazela Ahmed's question? Looking at, I am a science instructor in the Faculty of Education. I'm wondering about the long-range plans and which model is appropriate for pre-service teachers. Naomi, do you have any thoughts about that? or?
I find that both work. It gives you a chance to, by looking at both, gives you a chance to see connections. And so sometimes you might resonate more with one or another, but looking at both definitely for pre-service would be helpful, I think.
Mhm.
I think to add to that, sorry, I was muted. I didn't realize. Just like Louise mentioned, if you're looking at both of the plans, you can kind of also do a comparison and see, especially with pre-service, what are some of the key differences and how are some of the approaches different between the two models. So.
I find the big questions, I just look at the first two columns, and that's what really guides me. But I guess you're right. It can be a very personal experience.
The question of combined grades is coming up again, and because the units are planned with big ideas in mind and guiding questions, a lot of them lend themselves well to doing them in multiple grades because it's already embed, like multiple strands are already embedded in the units. We also looked at here with the Ontario curriculum, if you look at the expectations, you can compare grades. By reading across, you can make connections and see how things might, like an overarching inquiry or a guiding question could cover more than one strand. So that having that available to be able to see everything together could be helpful. So we also have somebody asking about the link to the long range plans. It is this site called scitechontario.ca. And when you go to the site, you scroll down and you'll find primary, junior, and intermediate long range plans. And there's 2 models for each. I'll just put the link back in. Some
There was
people-
a, oh, sorry, Louise, go ahead.
I'm just going back and showing again when you're on the Ontario site with the curriculum resources for science, you click on grades and then expectation by strand. And this is for grade 2. And underneath the overall expectation, you have compare grades. So for each of these, you can go and compare the grades, and then you'll be able to read across a grade above and a grade below.
Also on the plan, the PDF that are on the website for the long range plans, under model 2, where it says cross-curricular integrations, there's also for the grade above and I believe below strands that would work well together. Oh, thanks.
I also just wanted to speak. There was someone who posted in the chat about feeling overwhelmed about having that idea, especially because of science and social studies often going hand in hand. And how do you get 2 strands of science reported on when you also have to do social studies? One of the great things about these plans that we worked really hard to do is to make sure that when you were looking at multiple strands, the activity, it was only one activity that you could assess in different ways so that it would cover different strands at the same time. So it's cliche, but it's that work smarter, not harder thing. But we do recognize that it is a robust curriculum for sure. But as a group, when we were writing the long range plans, we did feel that if you try to incorporate a little bit every day, or this person is a planning teacher, so maybe you don't have the option to do every day, that perhaps it would be a little less overwhelming to have smaller chunks of it rather there.
I see quite a few questions. There's one from Jennifer Elia about looking at multiple long range plans. And sometimes it's almost like a menu. You might get inspired to use things in if you have a school board or a school long range plan as well. So it's not meant to be used as a strict plan. You can just go and pick and choose, and that might inspire other things. And there's also questions about report card writing. And some of the ways to address this is really starting with strand A, because strand A is your skills, and then completing the sentence. So you have the verb from strand A, and then you would complete it with whatever topics you might have touched on that might be related to other strands. So if you're doing coding, engineering, design, if they're writing a hypothesis for an experiment, that's the skill. And then what was the context? Was it because they were doing observing ecosystems, or was it because they were building device testing structures? So that's one way to look at these plans, starting with strand A and completing the sentence with the context.
Yeah, it also connects really well to the new math curriculum and how we're writing those comments now. It's a very similar idea to now with the new revised science curriculum. It kind of shows the connections between the different strands and really looking at it through a guiding question. The skills the students are developing is helpful. Oh, and it's 7:33 now.
It is. Megan, just before you move on, there is just one really brief question. Someone was wondering if they could get the slide deck of our presentation. We will figure out how to do that, and then we will let people who've registered, how you can download it. It may be as simple as going to the SciTech website that you see in front of you. Or it may be come later in an email, but we'll figure out those details and get back to you for that. Thank you.
So if we can just keep sharing that screen, I'd like to introduce now Justine. Paula mentioned that she was one of the people that did the resources, and this is the answer to some of your questions with regard to curriculum resources. So thank you, Justine.
Great. Thank you, Philomena. So now that you've had a look at the long range plans and thought of all those amazing questions, the next step is using them to put actual lessons into action in the classroom. I saw that you've been connecting with some great ideas from there. We as a resource writing team work together to create a series of resources for 2 strands of science at each grade level. So I'm going to talk a little bit about grade 3 as an example, but you can find them at every grade level. As we've mentioned, or if you're joining us later, they're not yet available online live. So there's no link to put in the chat at the moment, but what you see up there on the screen is where you'll be able to find them. So this is the same website where you would have registered for this webinar and found the long range plans. There's a little arrow pointing to curriculum resources. They will be available by the end of November, as Sheila mentioned. And there is an option, again, to sign up with email if you'd like to have an alert and get in there as soon as you can. What you'll see when you do have a look at them is learning experiences designed to provide content-specific lessons and activities that cover 1 to 3 class periods. Each resource is made up of a series of experiences leading to a culminating task. These are really well thought out, complete lessons that bring to life the ideas in the long range plans. You can use them as is or adapt them and follow the process. And we can go to the next slide. So this is an overview of the 3 experiences that make up the grade 3 resource that I mentioned. So when learning about structures in grade 3, this is kind of a sequence of events that's suggested. So this resource explores structures and stability. The first part of it uses a concept attainment approach to help students understand and kind of co-create the definition of a structure. So in that picture, we see an example. It's pointing to broth from soup, and that's a no. That is not a structure. So you go back and forth between yes and no and help students kind of wrap their head around what is the definition. In the middle is the second part of the experience, where students are invited to bring in recycled materials and complete a series of building challenges where they're building and testing structures. Again, some really specific ideas are suggested, but you might well find that students have their own ideas and possibilities, and excitement comes up and you veer off a little bit, and that's great. The idea is in experience 3, they're putting together the definition and all of the things that they've learned and worked on to apply their learning with an assessment piece connected to the real world. So how did we do this? As a team, we started by looking at the long range plans, just like you did now, and identifying those curriculum connections and learning goals included for a specific time period. As you saw, the plan set out a year at a glance. So we wanted to take a little snapshot and think about how would we actually teach this. Even if you plan your own year in a different order, and I saw some of you talking about different, like a rotation of years, that's fine. You can still benefit from zooming in on sections of these plans. So once we had that figured out, we developed a common template and used it to lay out how we would go about teaching these concepts and skills on a day-to-day basis. So this is a sneak peek, a draft of the first of the grade 3 structures resources. So we'll take a look at the actual document, and then I'll go over some sections of it using slides to kind of, again, zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to share my own screen with the draft copy. And it looks overwhelming, but again, you can pick and choose, you can come back to it. We just wanted everything to be in there as needed. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You'll see, of course, a title at the top and a link to the long range plans. So you can have an idea of where this all started. Where did we get these ideas from? So each resource often starts with open-ended questions to encourage inquiry and help students develop that sense of curiosity and wonder. And then you'll see kind of rows and columns like this. So there again is a little overview and a link to the long-range plans. The resources also do a really good job of explaining the prior knowledge that's required on the part of both students and teachers. So if there's something you're unfamiliar with that you may need to brush up on a little bit yourself, or if you think maybe your students might need some pre-teaching before they jump into a certain topic, you can find some ideas here. This also gives some information about what types of strategies are being used. So if you're unfamiliar with one of the ways of teaching these things, it might be also good to check this box here. Next, we have put the strand A expectations in a box by themselves so that they stand out. And again, as was mentioned, these are really great for reporting purposes, but it's kind of counterintuitive because we keep saying strand A is integrated throughout the resources, which it is, but here you can see what it is and just know that you're addressing strand A, and different resources speak to different aspects of strand A. I'll keep scrolling down. So we've got some big ideas and fundamental concepts that are explained. Here we're looking at relationships, cause and effect, and systems and structures. I'll go into more detail about learning goals and success criteria on a slide to come. We've got key points from the Ministry of Education. This is one of the things that can really feel overwhelming. I saw some questions about coding. You know, it's in the math curriculum, but it's also now in the science curriculum, and we don't want to step on any toes, but we do want to make sure that we're doing it. So integrating things like coding, climate change, food literacy, these are all things we know are important parts of science and in just important parts of the world, but they might not be addressed so specifically in existing science programs and resources. So as a team developing these resources, that was one thing that we really focused on, is how to make engaging connections. So one example would be writing code for taking nature walks when investigating seasonal changes in grade 1. I saw somebody, I think, had mentioned in the chat that even if you don't have all that technology at your fingertips, often in these primary resources, there are great low tech or no tech activities provided that still get at the essence of coding. So I'll keep scrolling down. This is the real kind of heart of the matter here in the middle of the document where it says learning experience. So this is a 3-part lesson, essentially. They often start with a guiding question or provocation to get students thinking, to activate their prior knowledge and ideas. So we've got a minds on, lots of different possibilities, and you can see right in here, there are links to any resources that you would need. There's an action component. There's our definition we've been working on together in terms of structures, and then there's a consolidation part at the end. Timelines are always suggested. So you can see here it says consolidation, that there's a 15-minute suggested timeline for that, but the experiences can easily be prolonged through extension possibilities, through just being open to where students bring things. Conversely, if you're wishing to add just a few ideas to your existing program and saying to yourself, you know what, I don't need all these lessons with so many things in them, please just take what resonates, pick and choose. Maybe there's something, you know, you've got a great structures assessment already, but you're looking for ways to integrate other things into it. That's great too. I'll keep scrolling down. There's lots of possible extensions to keep things going, information about what the students do. We'll go into curriculum expectations. You can see there's lots, key vocabulary is covered, all equipment and materials. This is a handy section too. So there's the section that says timeline and preparation would be a good one to highlight and pay attention to the first time you look at this, because it gives ideas for things that you need the day of, right? So with those structure building challenges, how do you set up the classroom? What, you know, how do you prepare for that? But even to get to that point, you need to work backwards and potentially invite families to send in those recycled materials. So this is a really important section to look at, to be able to do that backwards planning and make sure you are ready to teach. There are always safety considerations. In this case, they're pretty minimal. No protective equipment is needed, but a couple of things to keep in mind. We'll talk a lot more about assessment on a future slide. And then instructional strategies and adaptability are always in there. How can you best support students? What are some things to keep in mind? It brings me also to the idea of culturally relevant content and strategies. That's a big part of supporting students and doing everything we can in there as well. So we'll touch on those again later too. Scrolling down, there's some resources, there's games, some suggested materials. Again, cross-curricular opportunities we will talk more about. This is the last part of the document. So future opportunities and next steps. This includes both ideas to kind of take the whole class with the whole unit or investigation or whatever it is that you're doing, but also just ideas for early finishers. What are some meaningful things students can be doing if they've completed other aspects of their work? And an important thing to note down there is that we've often suggested things like investigating contributions made by, in this case, Black, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit individuals and groups to the area of design and building. So lots of great ways to include representation in your planning. So I'll stop sharing my screen and just talk a little bit more about this template before we go to some other sections. So if we could go back to that same slide, Philomena, with the curriculum resources at the top, I can just talk a little bit about that template.
Louise, can you pull that up easily? I'm just answering a question from Jacqueline.
Okay.
Thank you. That's my favorite slide too. I should be able to find that. Assessment for learning, assessment as learning, assessment of learning.
So I think we're going back to the one that has that, what does it say at the top? The lesson plan template still.
Okay, sorry, that's which slide is
So
that
slide
again?
20.
Thank you. I will have that up for you in a moment.
Perfect.
This is
Great.
Okay, thanks,
So we'll go
Louise.
back a little bit. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I just wanted to take a second and talk about the template a little bit. It's really long and can feel overwhelming at first. It's a lot to look at, but the idea is that it fully prepares teachers for each step of the learning experience. It's something you might want to print out and take in and highlight what you need. And as I said, take what resonates with you. And when you're translating, when you're following that same process to take parts of the long range plans and translate them into resources, this level of detail might not be necessary for you. As teachers, we often have a lot of these things in our heads, cross-curricular connections, accommodations, ways to, make sure all our students are included. So you may not need to use a template like this to spell it all out, but it's intended to be a good model for how to make these science lessons as opportunity packed as possible. So we can go on to the next slide, but first, I'm just going to say, I know it's a lot to take in. So before we start looking at some of these individual sections, I'm just going to suggest something that I've done with my grade 3 students during remote learning over the past few years, which is taking a 20-20-20 break. So the idea is you look 20 feet away from your screen, ideally out the window, although it's kind of dark now, so it might not matter so much. And if a window is not available to you, you can just look in the farthest corner of the room. So 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And the idea is to do this every 20 minutes. It's not always possible. I won't put a timer on the screen since the idea is to look away from our device, but I'll just count to 20 in my head, just try to focus your eyes somewhere else, and then we'll get back into these expectations. Okay. So this particular slide shows some of the curriculum expectations covered by the experience that we've been exploring. So just this first grade 3 structures experience. I tried putting all the curriculum expectations on here, but the font was way too tiny. So there's a lot going on in each of these. And although I couldn't fit it on here at all, the resources explore lots of other cross-curricular opportunities. One small example would be taking those images from the concept development slideshow and sorting them into a Carroll diagram in math. Again, there's strand A that again looks like it's by itself, but it's not. And one thing that helped us feel much less overwhelmed in our planning was just remembering it's not an add-on, it's not a standalone, it's integrated throughout. You'll see these little symbols throughout the resources that explain which parts of strand A are being addressed and where. We can move on to the next slide. So the resources set out really clear learning goals and ways of checking that students are meeting them. I know there were a lot of questions about reporting and assessment. Teachers are always encouraged to adapt the ideas on here to their own particular students and setting, but it's super helpful, of course, to have a starting point. You'll see that first point with the actual link suggests having a scientific journal as an ongoing assessment piece. These journals are a common feature throughout all of the primary learning experiences. So again, for people teaching combined grades, that could be a nice way to bring things together. If you've got a 1-2, the grade ones, may be accessing their journals in different ways and maybe doing more drawing than writing at the start of the year, but they've got kind of like a common way of working and acting like scientists. So we've got templates that you can use for that as well, which could be something helpful. We'll move on to the next slide about assessment opportunities. So this is a chart laying out the 3 key types of assessment for, as, and of learning. So if you look there at that third column, this is where in this resource can you find these types of assessments. So it begins with the See, Think, Wonder activity that activates students' prior knowledge and helps you as a teacher to identify any misconceptions that they may have. Then again, in the middle, assessment as learning, they're using their scientific journal pages and things like class discussions to kind of express their thinking about concepts and apply them. And then at the end of this experience, there's a ticket out the door reflection in the form of a thinking routine called I used to think, but now I think. So in the resources, sample responses are often provided. If this is something you've never done before, you can see, one possibility might be is that a student would say, I used to think that a structure had to be a building, but now I see that it can be found in nature. So just having an idea of what you might expect can be handy, but we know that our primary students often surprise us. We can move on to career spotlight. Okay, so this was something that was new to many of us working on the resources, just this idea of focusing on careers in science. I've often talked to my students about, what a scientist is, what they do, what they look like, but one of the things we try to do here is to get really specific about the different types of careers that involve science. So what you see on the screen right now is an example from Experience 1, again, about structures. But I can just give you another example from a grade 2 resource about needs of living things. So there's lots of great things going on in that resource. And at one point it suggests connecting with members of the local community to learn more about the careers that are kind of touched on in there. So a couple possibilities being wildlife rescue worker and biologist. So it's really exciting to get students interested in these specific opportunities, and just good to focus in on them. And we use that word spotlight to kind of highlight that idea. We've got one more slide specifically about, again, something that you'll see throughout all these resources is equity, diversity, and inclusivity considerations. And you can pick up on that in terms of both the pedagogy and the content. So each teacher will have their own ways of recognizing and celebrating the diversity of their students and of the world. The resources offer some of these ideas and more as starting points in terms of ways to help students feel seen and heard and make meaningful connections. So again, here are some possibilities that can be found in this one resource. There are lots of others, and one of the things that you'll see mentioned in many of them is the importance of consulting with members of specific communities as well to ensure appropriate representation. So many boards often have somebody that you could talk to about these things, and remembering to do that again, just as you kind of lay out the plans of what to do when, is something really good to keep in mind. So again, it's a lot to take in, but it's really hopefully helpful in terms of integrating the new science curriculum and making it as seamless and as enjoyable as possible. It's really exciting that there's so many new ideas in there and so many things that are really relevant to our world today. So we hope that your wheels are, I can see that your wheels are turning in terms of how to get started in your own classroom.
Wow, that was a nice tour. Thank you, Justine. So we're coming close to the end of our time together. And I think we have Paula. Sorry, no, pardon me, we have Louise.
This project is actually a 3-phase project, and we have a lot of people to be grateful for that worked on the long range plans. And here are the writers of the long range plan. Some of them are here today with you. And then in the second phase was fleshing out some of the resources. So if we go on the next slide, you'll have the writing team for the resources as well.
Yes.
And then the third phase was about the coding resources, and that will be coming out a little later as well on the site. So that's the third part on that SciTech Ontario site. So the colleagues were part of it. So before we end, we're revisiting how you're feeling right now. So you're confident or still unsure? You can put that in the chat, giving us some feedback.
The nice thing is we know there's going to be no poop whatsoever. We're
That's
going to have some
right.
good, solid feedback.
It is very exciting.
Yes.
I think we had a lot of fun visiting the new curriculum, looking at embedding those strand A skills into everything that we do. No poop in the sweat. Lots of laughter for sure. Still unsure, and that's for sure. Like it is a journey, and I think for ourselves too. There's lots of things we want to try that we're still thinking about. Glad to see that people are feeling more confident.
Louise, I was going to say too that I know if I'm like anybody else who's here, I'll get off this webinar and I'll be like, oh shoot, I forgot to ask this question, or oh, I need to know about this resource. So for the time being, STAO has offered an email address where if you have questions regarding this webinar or regarding some of the resources that you have seen here today, you are welcome to send an email to their general mailbox and they will redirect it to who the appropriate person is. So on the screen in front of you is the email address, which is just info@stao.ca. And I would suggest if in your subject line, you put primary webinar question, and then that would help to direct your email to the right person. It might be one of us, it might be a different committee member, or it might be someone who works from STAO or one of the other organizations who's taken part in this. So.
And for those who were asking, yes, the videos are recorded. The webinars are recorded and will be posted, and so will the slide decks. And if you cannot attend, for example, the junior presentation that's tomorrow, you'll be able to access it this way. Next week, it's in French. If you have colleagues that teach in French, whether at a French board or in French immersion, they're welcome to come to the French session next week.
So this brings us almost to the end. As you see in front, it says, what additional supports do you need in order to feel more comfortable with this new long-range plan and resource document? So you get the last word. If there's something else that you think you need more help on, this in so many regards is a living document, because we're able to revisit and look at things. And we're asking you now, is there any additional support that you can think of off the top of your head that's sticking with your mind right now that you could either put in the chat for us to take away, for us to think about?
And at the same time, maybe our colleagues from STAO can confirm where the webinars will be posted. And if we have the link to register to the other webinars coming up in French and English, then maybe we could put that in the chat as well. Assessing coding is a big one, and I know for sure that there's notes about that in the fleshed out notes. So the activities coming up, those will be. I'm trying to find the links to register to the other webinars. I'll post that.
I know that if you just go to the SciTech site that we had posted earlier, and I think we can get that link back into the chat as well. If you scroll down, there are opportunities to register for all the webinars there. And I'm pretty sure the French one was there. But if not, again, info@stao.ca would be a great place to send your query to as well.
Sure. Yeah, the webinars will be posted, the recordings will be posted by the end of the week, and they are on the SciTech Ontario website. And if you are looking for the French webinars, you just need to choose the Francais at the top of the screen to bring you to the French version of the site, and that's where the links to the French webinars are.
So thank you. This brings us to close to our webinar, and you can see on the screen the SciTech Ontario site. You will also be receiving a survey that we hope you will fill out, because we will be using that information with the webinars that are going to be for the juniors as well as the intermediates. I'm looking forward to going to the intermediate webinar on Wednesday. So thank you once again for joining us for the primary webinar for the long-range plans and the resources.